What drew you to narrating Terminal Rage by A.M. Khalifa?
One thing I always look for when I'm establishing a relationship with a new author, or new to me, I should say, is just, do I connect with the material? And I don't want to give anything away about Terminal Rage, but let's just say it surprised me. I've done a lot of thrillers, and after a while you kind of come to expect certain things to happen. I don't know how best to describe it other than to say most every book has a protagonist, most every book has an antagonist. Those roles aren't really all that well defined in this book, and I found that to be a very brave choice. And look, I just love it when an author surprises me.
54 seconds left. Except for the familiar ticking sound of a bomb. The world around him has been muted.
Terminal Rage is particularly laden with phrases in foreign languages, multiple accents, and so coming from a personal aspect, how did you approach this project?
I tell you, that is the most difficult part of my job, is making it sound as though I speak French when I don't, making it sound as though I speak German when I don't. And there was so much Arabic in this book, but fortunately, thank God, Eamon, he speaks the language, and he did more to help me than any other author I've ever worked with. I've now been spoiled, and now I'm going to be expecting everybody else to put in this level. He sent me a spreadsheet that was absolutely astounding. He broke down each character by name, by whether or not they have dialogue, by who they are, what their socioeconomic background is, and for the Arabic names, he gave me sound files for how those names should be pronounced. So at that point, my job is basically mimicry, I sent him, the hardest thing to do is say full phrases in foreign languages. It's one thing to say an occasional word here or there, but each language has its own rules about things like elision, certain words becoming part of another. I mean, the British pronunciation of, tis, is, the T is from the first word, not the second. And yet, Arabic has obviously its own rules as well. So on those phrases, I would send them to Eamon for the yay or nay to tell me, is this close enough? It was easily my most challenging book I've ever done.
Wait, he said, then turned to one of his men called Reinhard. Prüfe, ob es irgendeine Spur von Sprengstoff gibt. Reinhard was an ice-cold customer with hardly a sign of trepidation in his eyes. He pulled out a small handheld device Blackwell recognized as a portable explosives detector. With unique cockiness, he punched a button, turned a few dials, waved the device around briefly, then nodded. Elleran, es gibt hier nichts. All clear. You can open the door now, Alex, Strauss whispered with relief.
Is there anything unique about this political thriller and anything new that it brings to the table?
It's very different. I can't point to very many authors who so successfully blur the line between protagonist and antagonist, the good guy and the bad guy. I really like it when authors treat the villains as though they are the heroes of their own story. Because nobody but a really cartoonish villain is going to be in it just because they're a bad person. So I found all the motivations for all the various characters to be fascinating and eminently real. I don't see that a lot in new authors, people new to the genre. I found this to be a very unique experience.
So this is his first book, but by now he's built up quite a few fans from this book. Is there anything they can expect to get out of this audiobook that's different from just reading it itself?
I think it's always different when you're listening to a book rather than reading it. There's a lot of debate online. Does listening to a book mean that you've actually read it? Most people are, firmly on one side or the other, and most people, I think, out of pride and for whatever other reason, they say, well, yes, absolutely, it counts. Well, it's not like, we're discounting it, but it is different. I think listening is a completely unique experience. In the old days, you had print, and you had the reader's brain. And they interpreted the story themselves. But with audio, there's an interpretation between the words and the listener now. I call it, some colleagues and I, we share the same term for it. I call it the construct. My job is just to make sure that the construct is as small as possible. So, yeah, it will be a totally different experience having the story read to you. And also, frankly, I think with the realism that Eamon brought to it in terms of those recordings that he gave me. I mean, some of them include sounds, not just speech. At one point, there's a character who makes pig noises. And Eamon put that in there, so I put that in there. I don't typically do that in other audiobooks, but it's what he wanted, so absolutely, by God, it's in there. So yeah, I think it'll be a unique experience for the listener.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. He's awake now. Alive? That's another question.